Okay, we're going to pick up with the election of 1844. And where we left off in class, we were talking about how the United States is moving towards gaining territory in Texas, Oregon, and California. Now we're going to kind of talk today about how that actually becomes a reality. So in this election, we have James K. Polk, who is a Democrat, running against Henry Clay, the Whig candidate. And both parties at this time are calling for the end of the joint occupation of Oregon and the annexation of the Oregon territory. So both parties are interested in actually claiming the Oregon territory for America. Polk, his campaign slogan becomes known as 5440 or fight, and he's referencing the line of latitude where he wants to establish the American and Great British border of Oregon. And Henry Clay still running on this idea of his American system. Well, Southerners begin saying that if we do annex Oregon, we need to annex Texas as well. And you can imagine that's because Texas would be a slave state, Oregon would be free, so they want to keep the balance. Well, Henry Clay didn't flat out admit support or show support for this idea of annexing Texas, while Polk openly says he supports annexing both Oregon and Texas, so that will gain him some popularity. Polk wins this election, and Texas is brought into the U.S. in 1845. Now remember that Mexico kind of warned what could happen if we did annex Texas, so now there is going to be a little bit of conflict regarding that. Okay? Mexico and the United States get into some territory disputes. There was a border dispute over the southern border of Texas. We argued where this border actually was. So you have both countries claiming some of the same land. So the United States starts sending troops to the Rio Grande. That's in South Texas. This is where we felt the Texas border was. So we start sending a lot of troops there, kind of as an intimidation tactic. We don't want to start the fight with Mexico, but we are kind of provoking it. We want them to fight us, and then we would fight back over this area. And when the two sides do start fighting, and so Congress does declare war against Mexico. Now, the U.S. was able to defeat Mexico within a year, and we sign a peace treaty with them called the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo. This officially ended war with Mexico. It recognized the U.S.'s claim to Texas. It established the southern border of Texas at the Rio Grande. And it allowed the U.S. to purchase some territory from Mexico called the Mexican Cession. and that territory is highlighted on your screen if you want to see what that looks like. It allowed us to purchase the Mexican cession for $15 million. And this included two territories known as the California and New Mexico territories. I know that's not present-day New Mexico. It's made up of a lot of other states as well, but that's what the territories were called at the time, just California and New Mexico territories. So we've gained some of this land. Now, these aren't officially states yet, but we have acquired the territory. Now, as far as Oregon is concerned, we still have, during the war, there's still kind of issues with Oregon. Remember, Polk pledged 54-40 or fight, meaning he was willing to go to war with England over where this northern border of Oregon should be established. But in order to avoid fighting two wars at once, he decided to negotiate with England over the northern territory, or the northern border of... oh, hi, Mr. O'Hara.
What's going on?
I'm currently recording a screencast.
Oh,
It's okay. It's going to be comical relief.
What's that?
Those are ironing boards. Yeah, it used to be a fax class, I think.
Oh, wait.
It used to be a fax class, like fax, family and consumer science, back in the day. You can say hey to my second hour if you'd like.
Pardon?
You can say hello to them if you'd like.
Oh, are they doing, is it recording right now?
Yeah, it's recording right now. This is Mr. O'Hara. He's gonna.
Hi, second hour. How you doing?
Oh, then fourth and fifth.
And fourth and fifth.
And eighth.
54-40 or fight.
Yeah. Who said that? You know.
Someone who hates Canadians.
That's true.
1848. Henry Clay.
Close. Polk.
James K. Polk. J.K., our most successful president ever. Left after one term because he had accomplished everything he set out for. Took a lot of land from Mexico.
Yes, exactly. Very good, Mr. O'Hara. Thank you. Guest appearance by Mr. O'Hara, ladies. Okay, thank you. Okay. So there's a little comic relief for you. Okay. So, let's see. We were talking about Polk. Yes, okay. 54-40 or fight. He in order to negotiate with England, they actually settled at the 49th parallel, so a little further south. So 54-40 or fight became 54-40 or whatever. Whatever's closest. But he did need to establish a border, and he really couldn't afford two wars. Okay, the Free Soil Party. I want you to know, and this is still, ladies, probably under a war with Mexico, and that's fine. But before we get to this next election, a new political party began to organize called the Free Soil Party. And the free is referring to free from slavery. But this party was made up of small farmers who did not want slavery to spread into the West. It was not so much a moral issue, more of an economic one. Because they could not compete with large plantation owners that used slaves. Okay, election of 1848. In this election, Polk will not run for re-election. The Whigs will nominate Zachary Taylor. He is actually a war hero. You don't have to know that, but war hero from the Mexican War. His nickname is Old Rough and Ready, but what is important is he's our only president that came from Louisiana. So that's kind of cool. He will win this election. He was running against Martin Van Buren, who is a member of the Free Soil Party, but you don't have to know that. Remember, Van Buren's still kind of ruined by his nickname Van Ruin, so he doesn't really stand a big chance. Unfortunately for Taylor, he will die in office due to an illness, and so his vice president, Millard Fillmore, takes over. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about today is California. So, we have a big discovery in the mid-1800s, 1848 to be exact, and that is gold. Okay, gold was discovered in California at this time. So So news gets out and thousands of people migrate to California in search of gold. Now, because now they have a larger population, California will create a state constitution and apply for official statehood. They applied as a free state. They did not want to be a slave state. They wanted to prohibit slavery. Well, Southerners initially blocked the admission of California to the United States because this would have upset again that balance of free and slave states in the Union. So again, when you need a compromise, who are you going to call? Henry Clay. So we see Henry Clay create our compromise known as the Compromise of 1850. That title is on your slide in the picture, in the map picture. And I do need you to know the year just because it's in the title. So the Compromise of 1850. This compromise did 6 things. California was admitted to the Union as a free state. It established the official boundary and border between Texas and New Mexico. This had been debated for a long time. It abolished the slave trade in Washington, D.C. That's just the slave trade, not slavery, but the slave trade, and that's a big deal because that's our nation's capital. So you see we are moving away from slavery. Next, slavery would be settled by popular sovereignty in New Mexico, meaning in the New Mexico territory, when they would apply for statehood, it would just be voted upon whether or not they wanted to be a slave or a free state. The same would happen in the Utah territory. This land north of New Mexico but east of California is known as the Utah territory. That slavery would be settled by popular sovereignty there as well. So basically giving the states the freedom to decide by popular vote, do you want to be a free or a slave state? And then lastly, and this is the big one, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed. The last part of the compromise, the Fugitive Slave Act. And the Fugitive Slave Act stated that police and citizens in free states, so including the North, in free states, were required to help return any runaway slaves. So if they came across any slaves that had escaped from the South, they are required by law to help return them to the South. If they refuse, this is punishable by law. You could be fined or put in jail. Very controversial part of the compromise. Alrighty, that's the end of your screencast. You can put this away, and we will finish discussing some notes on Monday. Alright?